Steve here with Alloyed RPG. In this episode, we will be discussing mastery, consequences of natural ones, corruption, and rolling with advantage. Again, there is a link to the free core rules in the description on this YouTube channel, as well as a free demo campaign for you to try out Alloyed RPG. Like and subscribe. As the old saying goes, practice makes perfect, unless you really stink at something. Let's start with the positive. Mastery occurs when you roll a natural 20, also called a critical roll in RPGs. Hey, who doesn't like to roll a nat 20, right? Now, if you recall from an earlier video, if you roll a natural 20 during a hard action in Alloyed RPG, you get to deal supreme damage, a d12, in addition to the normal damage that you would have dealt. So that's one positive for rolling a natural 20. The other positive in Alloyed RPG is that you gain mastery. At the top of your character sheet, you will notice these mastery tracks. There are two of them. There is one for normal abilities and one for magic. We'll talk about the magic one in a different video. For now, we'll just talk about normal abilities. So, as you're playing the game, when you roll a natural 20 during a hard action, you will add +1 to your mastery track. When you reach +5, then you will get to add 1 point, kind of permanently, so to speak, to any one natural ability. So you can add +1 to body, mind, or spirit, any one of your choosing, and then the mastery track goes back to 0. As much as we'd all like to say we're great at everything, life doesn't always work out that way, and neither does Alloyed RPG. You have just as much chance of rolling a natural 20 as you do of rolling a natural 1. So let's talk about what happens when you stink. When you roll a natural 1 during a hard action, you, my friend, get to roll a d4. That d4 corresponds to a number here on the natural 1 list. None of them are good. So the first one, that can't be good. Your weapon or gear is broken until it is repaired. That includes magic weapons and magic gear. 2, Butterfingers, your weapon or gear is dropped and can't be picked up by you until your next turn, but it can be picked up by someone else, including an enemy. Number 3, that's going to leave a mark. Half the damage you would have done is now done to you, rounded up. And finally, number 4, you should sit this one out, you skip a turn. So that is what happens when you roll a natural 1 during a hard action in Alloyed RPG. Now the good news is the natural 1 list also applies to enemies as well. And look, I am not unsympathetic to bad rolling. Those who know me know that I only wear white t-shirts, except I have one, my game night shirt. I am so notoriously bad at rolling that this is my game night shirt. Pretty sad. Let's take a moment and talk about corruption. Corruption is something that we pulled from a board game, Lords of Waterdeep, and applied it to RPGs. It has to do with alignment, and corruption is a mechanism by which we encourage players to stay in character according to their chosen alignment. So if they do things that would violate their conscience or that would go against their character's nature, they would gain corruption. And depending on the nature of the infraction or the magnitude of the infraction, that will determine the amount of corruption that is gained. So, for example, let's say your character is a 1, okay? So he's a good, law-following character. Okay, so that character does something that violates his conscience. Say he steals money from a till to do something whatever, do something selfish. That's a +1 on the corruption. But then let's say he falsely testifies against an innocent person, okay? That's a bigger magnitude. That might gain him a +2 corruption. Again, it's at the discretion of the GM. Let's say he murders somebody in cold blood. That's a +3 on the corruption scale because it was a huge violation in conscience. It would totally go against the alignment of a 1 kind of character. So he would get a +3 corruption. Well, what does that do? Immediately, as soon as you hit +3 on the corruption, you get -1 from your spirit ability, okay? -1, and remember these abilities can go down to -5. So that's what corruption does, is it goes against your spirit, gives you a -1 on there. Of course, then once that happens, it resets to 0. So back to kind of the whole purpose of it again is to keep characters playing in character. Now, some GMs, myself included, will offer a player a chance to redeem themselves. Let's say they put them on a side quest to do penance or something like that so that they can remove corruption from their character. However, we don't allow them to remove anything that's already made it to the minus on their spirit section. So in other words, if they've got, say, 1 or 2 corruption points that are floating around on there, we can let them do something to basically remove one of those. But once you've reached that +3 and then it goes and dings your spirit, that stays there. Now you might think, well, what's the big deal? I get a minus on spirit and sort of who cares? Until you realize that in Alloyed RPG, a lot of the magic casting involves using spirit as the modifier to make that magic successful. So it actually does become a pretty big deal. The only other way of removing corruption from your spirit is through mastery. So if you're planning on doing stuff out of character, you better get really good at rolling natural 20s. So finally, let's go ahead and talk about advantage. From time to time, an encounter may become slightly imbalanced where the scales might tip a little bit one way or the other. Maybe you're going to have smoke that drifts in and obscures vision, or maybe somebody's been hanging onto a rope for too long and they start to fatigue. So in those kind of cases, the GM can decide to roll with advantage or with disadvantage. And that can apply, again, to both sides of the equation. So a roll with advantage is simply rolling 2 of the dice that you normally roll, usually a d20, and then you keep the best one. So a roll with disadvantage keeps the worst one of the 2. Pretty simple, and it just kind of adds to the little things where there's a nuance that the GM wants to maybe mitigate just a little better. Well, there's a pretty simple overview of mastery, rolling natural 1s, corruption, and advantage in Alloyed RPG. Again, the core rules are free, and there is a download link in the description in this YouTube channel, as well as a demo campaign for you to try and get started. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and as always, until next time, may your dice always roll with advantage.